Welcome to CSE 121, Programming 1 for Fall 2020. This is exercise 5, and it's called Password If-Else. And we're going to do a couple things for exercise 5, because this will be a little introduction to conditional statements using if-else and if-elif-else. And I'll go over those in just a second. What you want to do to start is come to your dashboard in Python Anywhere, and also check your consoles. Go to consoles. If there's any open, you can see I was messing around with one here. You can X out of any consoles that you have open, and then go back to Files, and you're going to go into your CSE 121 folder, and you're going to make a new file, and you're just going to call it 5 dash, and we'll call it password, and I'll just put if-else. If you don't put that, it's okay. I'm just putting that there just to indicate that we're working on conditional statements. It's kind of an introduction. So I'll put py and make sure that it color codes things with py, and I'll hit new file. And also, for some of you out there who like to work in dark theme and you don't see it in here under accounts or anything, one thing you can do is if you do on Windows Control comma and on a Mac Command comma. So I'm on a Mac right now. If I do Command comma and I go over here and I have themes. Now on Windows, I'm not sure what themes you'll have here, but I have all these themes here. So if I wanted to use something like tomorrow night, I could work in this dark theme and I could start coding here in a dark theme. Now this will color code things because it's Python. So just remember you can do that. Now you can only do it for this session. It's only kind of a temporary thing, so it's not permanent. So you'd have to do it every time. But if you'd like to work in a dark theme, you can just do Control comma. Now I'm going to go back and do Command comma because I'm on a Mac, and I'm just going to put it the way it was, and it was just in my Chrome theme, which is your default. So I'll just go back to that for now, if you don't mind that. And what I'm going to do here in my password if-else, I'm actually not going to start off with a password just yet. I just want to go over if-else conditions because basically it's a conditional statement, a conditional block. And the first time you might be familiar with a condition is as a kid, a parent, or some other person in authority might have given you a condition like you better clean your room or else you're not going to go out or play video games or whatever it is. So that's how you learned about conditions as a kid. You learned if you did something, you could do something that you like to do, or you can get dessert or something like that. If not, then you can't. So that's kind of where you learned right or wrong a little bit. So that's kind of how if-else statements are, or conditional statements. There's a condition and then something's going to happen. And that'll make programming a little more interesting because then everything won't be already completely planned out. It'll be based on whatever someone enters or whatever someone chooses or whatever happens during the programming flow of control. Just as an example, if we had a variable called room status, and I assigned it to a string called clean. That means your room is clean. That means your room status is clean. And then if we did a conditional statement, this is where a parent or somebody might be saying you better clean your room or else. And again, there's where that if-else comes in. Now, if I did something like if room status, so I'm checking the room status. I'm checking that variable and making sure I have it spelled right. And then what I'm going to do here, and this is kind of the reason I'm doing this, if you're wondering why I'm doing something so simple, I'm going to put equals equals, and then I'm going to say clean, and it has to be exactly like it is right now. What I'm also going to do, I'm going to put a colon. You have to hold shift and get the two dots, not a semicolon. This is a colon. It means something else is coming after this, because when you do that, when you hit enter or return after that, it's going to indent it for you. So this is the start of a conditional block, and this is the if statement. Another thing I want to point out is that this operator is an assignment operator. It's basically saying the room status, the value of room status is clean. That's an assignment operator. We use that with variables. This is testing equality. It's basically a comparison operator. It's testing whether this is equivalent to this. So it's not assigning anything like a variable. It's actually testing between the two. It's comparing. So that's why we use two equal signs instead of one. This is an assignment operator. This is testing equality. And we're going to use that throughout everything we do in Python. Now, I put the colon here. If I didn't put the colon, if I just hit enter, it goes on the next line, and then we have to indent it. We'd have to say if room status is clean, let's just say print you can go out. So we'll print you can go out. Now, this thing has to be indented. What we're missing here is the colon. So that has to be there, and then this has to be tabbed over. You can do spaces or you can tab. I'd recommend just doing a tab to tab it over. Or if you put a colon here and then you hit enter, it'll automatically indent it for you. So always put the colon there. That way it'll automatically indent it for you. Now, it won't go back out to the margin again because what we have here, if room status is clean, you can go out. What we're going to put here is the other condition, the else. That's if you don't clean your room. So that's usually a bad thing. So the else actually will not have a condition because it's either clean or it's not. We could have another condition. If you partly cleaned it, then maybe you could go out for an hour or something. But here we only have basically either it's true, room status is clean, or it's not. So that's all it is here. It's kind of black and white. It's true or false is kind of the way to look at it as well. So else means it's not true. So it didn't meet the if condition. So if the if condition is not met, then we're going to put something here like print. I'll just put stay in because that'll just be shorter. We'll do that. So stay in. So if room status is equal to clean, you can go out, else you can stay in. So if I save this, now we're going to change this because we're going to use a password in a minute here, but just to show this, I'm going to print this out and it says you can go out. We can go out because room status is clean, and here we checked if it's clean, and it does. The value of the variable room status is equivalent to being clean, and that's what it is up here. So it's double checking that. If it returns as true, which that is true, then that'll work. Now if you spelled it wrong, if you said clean and you saved it and you ran it, you got to stay in because your room isn't clean, it's clean, and that's not clean. So that's what it has to be there. Now I'll put this back to clean, and I'll say if room status is clean. Now let's say they looked at your room and they were like, hey, it's dirty. We checked it out and it's pretty dirty. So room status is now dirty. So if we say is room status clean and we save it, we run it, now you have to stay in because it's going to come here and it's going to try and validate this. It's going to say is room status, is the value of room status equivalent to clean? And it'll look up here and it'll go, nope, it's not. And then it won't do this and it'll move on and it'll check another one and it'll go here, oh, else stay in. So this is the condition, this is the result. So it will not follow through with the result if the condition's not met. It'll just move on and it'll move on to an else. Or even if you didn't have anything here, you could even not have something here. You can just say if room status is clean, and if it's not clean, nothing happens. Nothing happens because it's not clean. Now, you don't get any feedback here, which is kind of confusing, but it'll still check this. You don't get an error or anything. It checks this and it says, is it clean? And it just says, well, you can't go out. This is like a parent, I guess, not saying anything. They're not saying anything. They're just giving you the silent treatment. So they're not even saying you have to stay in. They're just not saying anything because they looked at your room and it's pretty dirty. Anyway, that's kind of kid stuff. So I just wanted to point that out first. Let's move on to the password thing. I'll get rid of this so that we can kind of practice that again. We'll move on to the password. Now I'll put PW just to make it easier. And instead of dirty, I'll change this to Python because we're working with Python. Our password is Python. And obviously we're going to enter this eventually. But let's go here and start another conditional statement. And I'll say if PW, and I'll say equals because a password has to be exact, and I'll just put Python, and don't forget the colon, so shift and make sure you put in your colon, and then when you hit enter it'll indent for you, and if you forgot that you'd have to tab over, and what's going to happen here is we'll put print, and we'll just put a string that says welcome, and we'll just print it out. So if the password is Python, welcome, and I'll put an else here because basically if you have a password, either it's right or it's not right. So we'll put an else. So notice how I had to move back to the margin here. I don't want to keep my else underneath here. This is in this conditional block, you have to move back out and then that'll help it move on. This is the condition, this is the result. Then we're going to go to this is the next condition. Now there's no actual condition because else just means if this isn't true. So we'll just put else and I'll print out password incorrect. We'll just do that for now. Now, you don't have to do a semicolon. This isn't like JavaScript. You don't have to do anything to end it. But this is our conditional block that we have here, if and else. Now, right now, let's save it, and I'll run it. And it says welcome. I'll even put an exclamation point because they're really happy to see us because we got the password right. Now, this isn't that interesting because the password's already set. What usually happens is you have to enter a password. So let's do that. Let's change this to an input statement so that we don't know what you're going to enter. And I'm not going to put Python here. I'm going to say enter password. That way you have to know the password ahead of time. And I'll put a colon and a space, just like we were doing with our other inputs. And now it's going to say enter password. And if we get it right, it's going to say welcome. If we don't, it's going to be password incorrect. So this is going to be exciting because now we don't know what's going to happen. I could either get it right or wrong. So let's see what happens. We're going to save this. And now the pressure's on. I'm going to put in Python. And oh man, I had my caps lock on and look what happened. Password incorrect. So now there's nothing I can do. There's no like, please try again or anything like that right now. And it's not going back. We're going to have to work with validation and work with loops and things like that to get it to run again. So right now you just have to run it again. So let me run it again and try to get it right. And that's a good thing to do when you're testing things is try to get it right, try to get it wrong, see what happens in all situations. Now I'm going to try to get it right this time. I'll put on Python lowercase. And now it says welcome. Isn't that exciting? And I'll run it again. Click here and put a capital P and hit enter, and that's wrong. So it has to be lowercase Python because that's what I'm saying it needs to be. This is the condition. PW has to be equivalent to Python, to that string. So everything here is okay to start. Now, one thing we could do is add more to our block. We could do something called elif. So I'm going to go here and do an elif, and that way I can catch if I do it in caps or if I do it with a capital P. So I can go here, and this would be in between the else. You always want to leave the else at the end. That's kind of like the last thing. You know, if it's not anything, else is what comes last. So that's why I'm going to put elif here. Now I got to move back to the margin and do elif. And elif requires a condition. So I have to put PW equals, and this time I'll put all caps. I'll put all caps like that, and don't forget I need the colon, and then I need to put my condition, and that will also be welcome. So I could just copy this one and paste it here, and then as long as I'm doing that, I'll copy this elif again, the 2 lines, and again make sure to move the elif back out. So all the conditions have to be out, so everything looks okay. So these should all be out at the margin. These should all be indented. And if you put your colon and you hit return, it should indent it for you. If not, if this went in here, you can hit your tab key. And that should work like that. So we basically have 4 conditions here. An if, 2 elifs, and an else means if it's wrong. These are different conditions that might work. So that way, I'll fix this here. This should be like that. I didn't change that one yet. So this, it covers 3 conditions here. Python, Python all caps, Python sentence case. So those will all validate as true and print out welcome, either one of those. As it goes through the list, it'll go here first. It'll say, is it this? If not, it'll move on. It'll say, is it Python all caps? If not, it'll move on. If it goes to here, it'll say, is it Python with a capital P? If not, it'll move on. If it was none of those, it's going to move on to here and print this out. So I'll save this and run it. And this time, I'll do it with a capital P and just try that out. And that works. And I'll run it again and I'll try all 3. I'll do it with a lowercase. That still works. And it says welcome. And I'll just try the all caps version. And holding shift and doing all caps and caps lock, you try them both. So anyway, that works. And then of course, try it wrong. Just put some gibberish in here and it's incorrect. So it's working. So that's what you want to do. You want to check all conditions and make sure it's working right now. So that's just an input. And we're only working with strings right now. So we're not doing anything with numbers or math or anything like that. We're just working with strings. Now, one last thing to point out here with this exercise is this is very repetitive and not very efficient because we're printing out welcome 3 times. And we're vertically going down here and making this conditional block very long just because of all these different statements. You might think, isn't there an easier way to do this? And there is. We can use something like a logical operator or, because basically you're saying if it's this, or this, or this, you're going to print welcome. So welcome is going to be the same thing for all 3 of these. So that way we can put one result and put our conditions all together up here. So one thing you could do if you get rid of this stuff is you could cut this. Just going to cut it. And notice I'm cutting the whole PW equals. So I'm going to do either Control X or Command X. And I'm going to go up here and put that in, and I'm going to put my OR operator in between here, and it should change color. And then I'll cut this one, Command X or Control X, and I'll put OR, and I'll put password equals Python, password equals Python. Now I only need one print statement, so I don't need all this stuff. Make sure you get rid of that one. So basically we're down to really 2 conditions. If these 3 things, and then if none of those, it's going to print out incorrect. So this should work as well, and you might just want to try this. And make sure you have the colon at the end here. Make sure this is indented, and I'm going to run it. and I'll just try all caps, and it works. And I'll try it wrong, just some gibberish, and it works. So this works. Now, another thing I want to point out here is you're going to be tempted to do this, to just say or, because repeating the variable in the equals is more work. So, well, couldn't you just do that? If pw equals Python, or Python, seems like it would work, right? Well, let's see. I don't think it should. I think we're going to have a problem. Let's see. If we enter Python, it says welcome. Let's run it again. Let's try Python, all caps. It works. And let me run it one more time. Let me try Python with a capital P. And it works. So I guess I was steering you wrong, wasn't I? By saying it wouldn't work, saying you had to have the PW there. Well, let's try one more thing. Let's run it one more time, and let's put in gibberish. It says welcome. Oh, maybe I did know what I was talking about putting the variable in there. Even though you're not getting an error, I guess it would really be a semantic kind of thing, because you're kind of writing this different, and Python really doesn't understand it. So it's just retrieving everything as true because you have all these ors in here. And I guess what's happening, it's never really going to the else statement. It's getting stopped here somewhere, and it's just kind of saying anything here, anything that you put in here is kind of working. I'm not sure of exactly the whole science of it, but what you need here is you need to put pw equals, and you don't have to have the spaces. I'm just doing that so it looks nicer. But I have to go here, and actually, let's try it with just one. Let's try with this and see what happens with this extra or, because it's worth checking out what works and what doesn't. I'm going to save that, and I'll run it, and let's try gibberish. It still says welcome, so it's still not working. So it doesn't matter if you have one or two. You got to have all of these. So I'm going to put pw equals Python. I'll save it. I'll run it. Now let's try gibberish right off the bat. Incorrect. All right, so that's good. Let's try one of these. Let's try the last one. We don't have to keep going through all of these. Welcome. Let's try the middle one. Welcome. And we'll put in one more here. And that works. So that works. So this is putting multiple conditions here. We could have done the same thing with the elif, just like we did the first time, but this is a little more efficient, a little less code, because we're not repeating print welcome 3 times. We're only doing it 1 time. If it's the same result, we might as well put it here after the condition. So the condition and the result, or the instruction that's happening after that. And then once this is true, it doesn't go to the else. So it skips over this if the condition is true. If the condition is not true, it goes to the next condition. So that's kind of the way they work. And we're going to be doing this a lot. So this is just a little introduction. So this one is called 5 passwords. So that's a little introduction. Obviously, we went over a lot of different things here, but we're going to do some more with our next one. We're going to do some things with ages and go over a little bit more introduction. Then we're going to put letter grades into our test scores after we do that. But we're going to do one more 5 exercise called age after this.